Jorge de Sena was born November 2nd, 1919 in Lisbon, Portugal. He was the only child of Augusto Raposo de Sena, an Azorian merchant marine, and Maria da Luz Grillo from the north. Both families belonged to the upper middle class, with ties linking them to the Portuguese aristocracy. His maternal grandmother lived in their home and was a profound cultural influence on the young man. A paternal grandaunt was close friends with Fernando Pessoa's mother, and he, the renowned poet, would sometimes be present in her house when Jorge came to visit. As a young man, he entered his nation's naval academy, and as a cadet traveled to Portuguese Africa and Brazil. He was then inducted into the army and received a commission as an officer. He left the service, completing his education at the University of Porto, where he graduated with an M.A. in civil engineering in 1944. In 1949, he married Maria Mécia de Freitas Lopes, and to their union were born 9 healthy children. Although an engineer with the National Highway Commission, Jorge de Sena's consuming interest was literature, a field he had begun to cultivate seriously both as a poet and critic since his university days. In 1959, he left Portugal and his engineering career to accept a teaching position in literary theory at the University of São Paulo, Brazil, while he completed his PhD. He then accepted a full professorship at the University of Wisconsin in 1965, and since 1970 has been a member of the University of California, Santa Barbara, where he is currently chairman of both the departments of Spanish and Portuguese and of comparative literature. Jorge de Sena's scholarly and creative production is incredibly vast and varied, and includes such genres as biography, criticism, essay, history, short fiction, theater, the novel, and poetry. To date, the number of his published volumes exceeds 100. Besides being the leading Camonian and Pessoan scholar, his own creative endeavor includes 4 volumes of short stories, 7 plays, and over 12 volumes of poetry. He is the recipient of numerous awards and prizes in various countries, including the prestigious Etna Taormina International Poetry Prize in 1977. One critic characterized his poetry as rich in allusions to our shared cultural heritage. But Sena is not merely a poet of thought and culture, but of feeling and conscience and of love. Dr. Sena, what prompted you to leave Portugal for Brazil in 1959 and subsequently in 1965 to leave Brazil for the United States?
Well, in 59 I had lived years and years under the Portuguese dictatorship, which I could not bear longer, and had been very much involved in many political activities of the opposition. And besides, I was looking for some kind of change in my life, since I could not go on being at the same time the administrator and technician that I was, and the writer and the lecturer and so on that I was too. So in 59, when I was invited to a convention, international convention in Brazil, I did go, invited by the Brazilian government, by the University of Bahia. I did go, and there I was invited and already had some contacts to accept the position as they say, catedrático, here and there and so on, and finally I've chosen São Paulo, where I stayed. And I stayed there, and I had my happy moments, very good moments in Brazil. Brazil is a country I love, and I became a Brazilian there, as a matter of fact. And
Let me ask you a question. Why, you say you left Portugal in 59
yes.
because of the activities and whatnot. Now, was that because of the poetry you wrote?
No, it had
or?
nothing with literature. It had to do with improper political activities, which were not to the taste of Dr. Salazar, I guess. But In Brazil then, I lived from 59 to 65, and in 64 came the military revolution, and even if I was not persecuted directly myself or anything of the sort, I felt that I had escaped once for one thing, and it was not to my taste to live in a second similar thing. So from the United States, many invitations had come to me once a while asking me if I would like to come to the United States and teach here, which finally accepted. So that's why I moved from Brazil to Wisconsin. And later on, as it happens so much in the American university life, I moved from Wisconsin, where I was 6 years, to California, where I am.
Well, you were a Portuguese citizen until 1963.
Right.
You became a naturalized Brazilian.
Yes.
Today you make your home here in the United States.
Yes.
Have you found here whatever was missing or denied you in Portugal and Brazil? And do you intend to become a U.S. citizen? Is that a possibility?
I don't know. I may really, because one of the reasons why I keep my Brazilian citizenship, it's not only because I love Brazil, it is because being born a Portuguese, the Brazilians don't like it. And as I was born a Portuguese, the Portuguese don't like it either. So just to retake both, I keep the citizenship. That's I think the main reason by now, because there's no other reason why I shouldn't be an American citizen one day, since many of my children are becoming that.
Now, were you ever kept from writing what you wanted to write in either of these countries, or kept from publishing what you wanted to write?
Never in Brazil during the times that I lived from, mainly 59 to 64, but even after, to some extent, I was prevented to write anything that I did want to write. In Portugal it was quite different, because we had learned to write between the lines. It was a special art that all the writers have developed by themselves, which really made many things not to be ever written, since and it was shown when the revolution came to Portugal in 74. Everybody was expecting the great masterpieces that had been kept in the drawers, and it may sound vain, but some people say that the only person who had something in the drawer, I was, with a tremendous collection of short stories which I had written in Brazil, thinking that I would never publish them since Salazar would never die. He finally did, as you know, because the patriotic chair collapsed under him.
Okay. Well, since the other people were kind of inhibited from writing because of the censorship and so forth, but those who were fine talents, such as yourself, were able to write between the lines, as you say. Was that censorship a help to the writers? Or?
No, I don't think so. The good luck we had, it was that for a long, long time, since the beginning of the coup, which had put Salazar later on in power, censorship was in the hands of military officers, most of them of cavalry, which was a great advantage because they had 2 legs and the horses 4, so this helped us very much for many years, since they could not understand most of the things that we had learned how to write for their benefit. So we can, but this don't prevent them to write, to cut things. I had many times entire articles entirely cut, or in 2 short stories of mine, I had to cut 2 chunks, which now in the new edition of these books are restored.
Well, you are really a Renaissance man, interested in everything, especially in creative or scholarly things. You've succeeded and been recognized in many genres. But why do you write poetry? What
Well,
motivates you to write poetry?
Let me see. Poetry, first of all, it was what I started by writing. And for many years, I was just writing poetry. And my first poem was published in 1938, now 40 years ago exactly. And I always have thought that poetry is really my main creation. Even when I'm doing things entirely different from poetry, I think that the poetic feeling is always behind everything I write. So I consider myself really a poet, even when I write just scholarly papers.
Are you motivated by something from without or something from within?
I think that I can be motivated. It's a kind of dialectics between within and without.
Could you describe
all the time, and I never know how things come, because you see, when I was very young, in late 30s and beginning of the 40s, I trained myself alone in many of surrealist techniques, and then I got a big scare because I discovered that they were no jokes. They were quite dangerous, and one had to back away from that, even if keeping in touch with some powers of freedom that the surrealist techniques could give you. But in doing so and in starting in that way, this has taught me a very curious lesson, which I keep still today. When I feel that I'm on the point of writing a poem, I refuse to know or to think about what the poem will be. Because I want the poem to be entirely free to develop from the inside and by itself, with no intruding from me. It happens that many times I'm waiting for something which I don't really know what it is. And then finally it comes. And it's very curious that either with poetry or with any other kind of work which I allow my subconscious to build up, or when they are learned things, I have to take my notes and then they organize themselves in my head. Always, when I write. And very rarely I have the patience to copy anything again or to make more than one correction here or there. That's the way I write. I think that we write for the future, certainly, but we write for our own time. And what we write must be the moment we write.
Let me ask you one last question. You've written about a number of themes, some of them political, some of them about love, some of them about culture, music. Of all these things, what would you say characterizes your poetry most?
Well, I think that all of them do. Even the satirical strain, which runs mingled up in an ironic way with many of their poems of other types. And about culture and anything of the sort, I always was against the idea that poets, to be considered important, must be stupid and illiterate. I consider that if they are not stupid or illiterate, which many of them are, you have to accept that as part of your own being, part of your own living, part of your own experience. And it has been my experience that together with living and with contact with human beings, which is essential for me, well, anything human interests me. I may say, and it may shock some people, that nature interests me, but nature interests me if human beings or human marks are upon nature. Otherwise, I'm not interested in nature at all.